A vertex, in graph theory, is a point that represents an object in a network. An edge, in graph theory, is a connection between two vertices. A directed graph is a graph whose edges have directions. An undirected graph is a graph whose edges have no directions. A path is a sequence of vertices connected by edges. A cycle is a path that starts and ends at the same vertex without repeating edges. A connected graph is a graph in which every vertex can be reached from every other vertex. A component is a maximal connected part of a graph. A tree is a connected graph with no cycles. A leaf is a vertex of a tree that is connected by exactly one edge. A weighted graph is a graph whose edges have numbers representing costs or distances. A shortest path is a path with the smallest total weight among all paths between two vertices. A bipartite graph is a graph whose vertices can be split into two groups with edges only between the groups. A matching is a set of edges that share no vertices. A function is surjective if every value in the target set is hit by at least one input. A function is injective if no two different inputs give the same output. A function is bijective if it is both injective and surjective. A relation is reflexive if every element is related to itself. A relation is symmetric if whenever A is related to B, B is related to A. A relation is transitive if whenever A is related to B and B to C, then A is related to C. An equivalence relation is a relation that is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. A partition of a set is a collection of non-overlapping subsets whose union is the whole set. A function's codomain is the set of values it is declared to output to. A metric is a rule that assigns a distance between any two objects in a set. A sequence is monotonic if it never decreases or never increases as it goes on. A bounded sequence is a sequence whose terms stay within some fixed range. A continuous function is a function with no jumps or breaks in its graph. A discontinuity is a point where a function is not continuous. An asymptote is a line that a graph approaches but does not meet in a certain direction. A sequence's limit is the value its terms approach as the index grows. A local maximum is a point where a function is higher than nearby points. A local minimum is a point where a function is lower than nearby points. A critical point is a point where a function can change from increasing to decreasing or vice versa. An inflection point is a point where a curve changes its bending direction. A vector's magnitude is its length. A unit circle is the circle centered at the origin with radius 1 on the coordinate plane. A radian is a unit for measuring angles based on arc length on a circle. A polynomial's degree is the highest exponent of the variable that appears. A leading coefficient is the coefficient of the highest degree term in a polynomial. A remainder theorem is a statement connecting division of polynomials to the value of the polynomial at a number. A quadratic formula is a method for finding the solutions of a quadratic equation. A complex conjugate is the complex number obtained by changing the sign of the imaginary part. A vector projection is the component of one vector in the direction of another vector. A basis is a set of vectors that can generate every vector in a vector space. Dimension is the number of vectors in a basis of a vector space. A linear combination is a sum of vectors multiplied by numbers. Linear independence means no vector in the set can be made from the others using a linear combination. A span is the set of all vectors that can be formed from a given set using linear combinations. An eigenvector is a non-zero vector that keeps its direction under a given linear transformation. An eigenvalue is the scaling factor associated with an eigenvector under a linear transformation. A probability distribution is a rule that assigns likelihoods to outcomes. A random process is a process whose outcomes involve chance. Expected value is a representative value describing the long-run average outcome of a random variable. Variance describes how spread out the values of a random variable are around its typical value. Standard deviation is a measure of spread that is commonly used because it matches the scale of the data. A normal distribution is a bell-shaped distribution often used to model natural variation. A binomial distribution models the number of successes in repeated identical trials. A random sample is a sample chosen by chance using a rule that avoids favoring particular members. Correlation describes how two quantities tend to change together. Causation means that changes in one factor produce changes in another factor.